Hello everybody, I'm Alex Shakespeare. I run the BA degree in Media Journalism and Publishing at Oxford Brookes University, and today I'm in conversation with the editor of the Oxford Mail, Samantha Harman, who you can see on the screen. Hi Sam.
Hello.
Hello. Just to let you all know, we're going to be talking about regional journalism and how, gosh, in a global pandemic, how does a newspaper run? But we'll also be looking at various issues around trust in local news and so on. So Samantha, thank you for joining us. It'd be lovely if you could just give us an overview of some of the publications that you work on, because it's not just the Oxford Mail, is it?
Yeah, it isn't. So the Oxford Mail is obviously our daily newspaper in Oxford. And then we have the Oxford Times, which is a weekly, the Bicester Advertiser, the Herald series, and the Witney Gazette. And then we have a few magazines, but our main one is Oxfordshire Living magazine, which is a monthly magazine. And then obviously all of our websites as well.
So no small job, and this particular climate as well. I know that you will have had to furlough some of your team, sports journalism, that's not happening, and so on. And obviously you're all working from home. Reporters who would normally be out on their beats, on collecting their stories. How are you running a newspaper and all of those publications during this time?
So I think it's really important for journalists to be out in their community. So prior to coronavirus, we all have a remote system so that our journalists can go out to court or inquests or just out to events, and they can file their copy from wherever they are. So for the reporters, although obviously it's a bit strange, lone working, and they all love being in the office, it's not too much of a transition. Obviously, we had to do some work with the system to make sure that we were able to do bits and bobs like production. But largely, it's gone quite smoothly, actually, which is good.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I've noticed that your campaign journalism during this period has been really excellent. And you've been pioneering lots of campaigns and supporting campaigns around community matters, as well as journalism matters. So I wondered if I just share my screen, I could show a few front covers, and I'd love to get your take on how those campaigns came about and the success of them, and just talk around some of the things that you really care about in terms of your paper and your community. Would that be all right
Sure.
with you?
Yeah, great.
Let me go to my screen and share that. Just a moment. Right, share screen. Share. Right, so here, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
If I just put this into presenter mode, here it is a recent cover of, well, you've actually got your local protest, the Oxfordshire protest of the Black Lives Matters campaign. It's a really evocative photograph, and interesting to see how you cover that from a local point of view, that global issue of the moment. Could you talk us a little bit about that image, and running that story?
Sure. So obviously, I think that we have a really important duty to represent our entire community. And obviously in Oxford, our community is very diverse, and we want to represent, first of all, and help and speak for the people of Oxford and what they are up to and what they want to see. And obviously, I think everyone found what happened to George Floyd completely appalling and terrible. And I think it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult for people, for white people like myself, to speak about it, because I think sometimes you're worried that you're going to get it wrong. And there's a lot of things that I've personally learned about myself and about my past behaviours over recent days. So it's a never-going, ongoing education process. But I think just because we might be worried about saying the wrong thing doesn't mean that we shouldn't stand up and say something. It's not enough to be silent on issues like this. It's not enough to just sort of quietly condemn it, but not say anything. I think we have a duty to be anti-racist. Racism is appalling, it's not okay. And I think that it was very important for us to come out and say that, really. And if people don't like it, they aren't welcome to read the paper, is my response to them.
And hopefully you're representing the majority of the views in our community. Did you get much response to that paper, to that cover?
We have had quite a bit of positive feedback. We've had some negative feedback too, but that, I think that says a lot more about the individual than it says about us and what we've done. I know inside that we've done the right thing, and it is right to condemn racism. And also it's really important, on Tuesday, obviously it was the Blackout Tuesday, and a lot of people posted the black square on their social media and muted themselves on social media for the day, but that I'm just very concerned that it would be performative, so that it's not an ongoing thing. And I think it's really important. We've got quite a lot of stuff lined up in the next few weeks or so. It's really important to keep the momentum up on these things. And in the paper, like I said, we might not always get it right, and people might disagree, but we do try and represent our community as a whole. So inside our publications, we often have first person pieces or columns or stories from a wide range of people from our community. But I feel that with what's happened, it's really important to put it front and center.
Yeah, excellent. And so I've got a picture here of the wall in the office of the Oxford Mail, and I know you posted about this on social media, and I'll mention your handles at the end so everybody can follow you. But you posted this because you were talking about how you might ensure that you're inclusive going forward. That the Oxfordshire magazines that you run, how will you change your policies around diversity for your magazines and your newspapers?
I think it's really important for us. So with the magazine specifically, we don't have a photography budget. So the photography that we get comes from brands. And I think that we could do better in terms of really challenging brands, because when they send over their photos, a lot of the times I will go back and say, and they've used, a straight size white model, and say, have you used anyone else in this campaign? And often the answer is no. I think, and just reflecting on what we've done personally since our relaunch at the beginning of last year, we've only had a woman of colour twice on the front page of the magazine, and we had an older woman in November 2019, and that is not good enough, really. I personally, even though obviously I'm a white woman, I personally feel the impact of going into a shop as a young impressionable girl and seeing these pitch perfect models, and that's telling me what I should look like and what I should aspire to be, and I don't, and that leads to a lot of problems with body image. And I cannot imagine what it must be like to be a child of a black child going into a shop and not seeing that. And I think Vogue has done an excellent job since Edward Enfield took over of really diversifying what they do, and I think there's work that we could do locally that we haven't done. And obviously I have to accept that is a fault of mine, a fault of ours. I think going forward we really need to say to brands, no, this isn't good enough. Please be more inclusive in the images that you're providing.
Yeah, because it's a complete effort, isn't it, between the brands, the publications, the editors, everybody who's involved in the supply chain of imagery for publications. So, and it's an industry-wide problem. And you mentioned Vogue there, so it's interesting to see how you will tackle it going forward. Thanks for that, Samantha. So, looking at some of your other campaigns, still open in Oxfordshire. Moving on to that. So, this is a really nice campaign that you started around the time, a few weeks into lockdown?
Yeah, it was the first week that we went in fully into lockdown, the 21st, just before.
And that was a really interesting one because you were trying to showcase who in the area was still open for business, and it was a really good service for the community, actually. I used it, I know many people that used it to see what was accessible. Was it received well?
Yes, I think so. Obviously our biggest, when you buy a newspaper, we've started now an online subscription service, but when you buy a newspaper, the cover price of what you pay doesn't cover the cost of producing a newspaper. So obviously we rely on advertising to make that happen, and our biggest advertiser by far are local businesses, and we, they were struggling, and we feel that we need to do something to support them, because if they don't survive through this, we don't survive through this either. And so that was really important for us, and now we're moving it on now to now open for the businesses that weren't open during lockdown but now are open again. We've had a really good response. We had a really good response from readers, but also from the businesses as well.
So it was a creative solution to response to your community during lockdown, but it's also a commercial decision. It's interesting to see how you balance those two to come up with some really impactful community projects. So I think that's something that you tend to do. I've been really impressed with the coverage. Well, I always am from the Oxford Mail, particularly on such a small team. But also the There With You campaign. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so the beginning of lockdown was really strange for everybody. As we know, and a large percentage of the readers who actually buy a physical copy of the newspaper are older people, and a lot of them were self-isolating. And we've heard from readers who have gone weeks and weeks without seeing anyone or speaking to anybody else. So we felt that it was really important for us to reach out to them and say, when you are on your own, we are there with you. Leading into that is the issue of course, that coronavirus, we as a business rely on advertising, and literally overnight, our revenues completely plummeted. So we've had to make some really quick, difficult decisions to survive through that. So it's kind of a way of also saying, we're there with you, please continue to support us, and just to educate people about the service that we're providing to the community, because I think sometimes that gets lost and people don't fully understand just how important it is to have a local news service and how dangerous it could potentially be if we don't have one. We don't have people asking the questions that the local newspaper asks.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that campaign we united with all of the regional dailies actually across, also Newsquest, Reach, JPI, Archant. We all did that together, and it was really impactful, I think. And the Times ran a piece on it. Yeah, it's a good. That was a good.
Between Archant and Newsquest, two massive regional publishers, to come up with that idea and to take over the front pages in that way.
So we actually work together quite a bit more now. I think the time of rivalry really is gone. I think you achieve so much more with collaboration than you're going to achieve with rivalry. So there's always ongoing conversations between all of the groups, and we have an editorial development director who sort of leads that conversation and came up with this campaign.
That's amazing. It's interesting to turn a regional or a local, one single individual community paper into this national story that hit the headlines in itself. And we've seen a lot of regional reporting hitting the headlines lately, and various editors. But just to continue on this idea of this, we need local papers for our democratic society. It is a public service. I noticed that you've covered we've covered the MP support in the paper around the buy a paper, pick up a paper campaign. And again, it seems to me that you changed slightly during the coronavirus pandemic, your commercial model. You now have a digital subscription. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's been received? Because I know people paying for news is a very contentious issue.
What? Paying for news? So I believe, and we believe, that there are certain stories that people have a fundamental right to access. There's a lot of information in the public interest that people have a right to access. So our paywall, we were discussing prior to coronavirus about putting a paywall on the Oxford Mail, but obviously coronavirus sped up that conversation because, as we said, advertising revenues massively dropped, and so we just need support from the community to be able to continue to do what we're doing. I think people think that we have a massive team, that I have different teams on different papers. The reality is that it's me, I have 2 other people on news desk, and then 6 reporters and a BBC reporter as well. And so it's a lot of work, and unfortunately people have come to expect what we do for free. They do see us as a public service, and in some ways we are, but in other ways we're not. So this was just about making people realise how important it is to have a trusted local news service. And our paywall, because people do have a fundamental right to certain information, you get 40 stories a month before you hit the paywall, but that doesn't include coronavirus news or breaking news. So you could be looking at potentially 150, 200 stories a month without ever being asked to pay anything. So I think that's a bit of a misconception as well. We've had quite a few people sort of message and say, your paywall only lets people read 3 stories, which isn't true. You can read up to 200 stories, and it's £1 a week. And obviously for that as well, you get 80% fewer adverts, which was one of our biggest complaints that we have for running a free website. People saying, I don't want to read your website because it's got adverts on it. But obviously if you're not willing to pay for the news, someone has to pay somehow for us to be able to give you that service. So it's one or the other, and if people complain about advertising, then they can now have access to the website.
So we've got a few minutes left, so just wanted to talk about the longer view campaign of Journalism Matters. You use, as you said, a BBC reporter. You also have a Facebook community reporter. Has that made a difference to your newsroom?
It does make a difference because it diversifies journalism. I think traditionally, when I started in journalism, so I, from a working class background, didn't know anyone in journalism, didn't actually think that I'd be able to do what I do because I didn't see anyone like me doing what I now do. And it has really diversified since then, but obviously we've got more work to do. And that traditionally also journalism is quite expensive to get into because either you have to do a lot of work experience for free, and you have to do your NCTJ or degree, which can cost a lot of money. So you either, like I did, work 3 jobs and then do your studying alongside it, or you have to have parents that can support you to get through. So what the community Facebook scheme does is it allows people who can't do that to train on the job with us, and it means that people from a wide variety of backgrounds can get into journalism, which is brilliant, I think, because the more diverse the newsroom, the better you are representing your community. It's no good for people who all look the same from the same background to be writing stories if they can't empathise with the people that they're writing them about. It's really important for us to be able to reach out and talk to and understand our community.
Yeah. So
that scheme's great, I think.
Yeah, and it's made a difference to your, not only the news remit that you're covering, but also in terms of the smaller team and your output. Has it really made a massive difference?
It makes a difference in terms of getting out into the community, definitely, because when you have a very small team and you have daily papers, some days we have 3 papers to get out, some days the reporters unfortunately are at their desks a lot, whereas with this scheme the community Facebook reporter doesn't really have a remit in terms of how many stories they have to file, and we find that ours is able to go out more into the community, and also into communities that we have previously not really done much with before, which is great.
Can you give an example of that?
So ours has did quite a bit of the Muslim community and went to Eid, and the other thing ours is Polish, which meant that he could also go out and talk to Polish community, which is brilliant, which again we wouldn't have perhaps traditionally done. And also it's just amazing because, like I said, he's from a background that really wouldn't have been able to get into journalism in Britain, but it's astounding. He can speak 3 languages. He went out on his first day, it was when Notre Dame burned down. He went out on his first day and spoke, and he's Polish, and spoke to the French community. So he's out writing in English, speaking in French, and wrote an amazing story. It's just incredible, really.
Brilliant example of the importance of diverse newsroom, definitely. Just going back to the broader issues around journalism right now, we see globally journalists are being targeted and under attack in recent weeks and months, but ongoing too. Locally speaking, we've also heard of a few cases recently. Amy Fenton, chief reporter at the Mail in Barrow, and I think one of a NewsQuest reporter has also written about being trolled as well. And I know you're quite vocal as well about the impact of the sort of culture of comments and trolling on journalists and local journalists. Do you feel, first of all, that local journalists are at more risk than they ever have been? And how do you think that affects their mental health?
Yeah, definitely I do. Personally, in my over 10 years of doing this job, I've been threatened. I've had to get the police involved on some occasions, but first of all, it's a bit different to being on national because you are part of your community, and people don't seem to realise that we are human and we live in these communities, and it can be quite stressful sometimes if you have someone who is sending you abuse to even go to the supermarket because you think, I don't know who this person is. They know who I am, what I look like. What if they're in the supermarket? It can be quite scary, actually. But I'm working with someone from Reach, someone from Archant and someone from JPI to work on an induction scheme for our new reporters so that we can say to them, look, this unfortunately is something that happens. This is what to do if you need to report it or escalate it. This is, there's a difference between criticism. If you've got something wrong, there's a difference between someone pointing that out to you and someone abusing you.
Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, I think there needs to be a whole big education about what's acceptable online because it adds another layer to the job, which is just not. And because it happened so fast and it's also new, there wasn't really any. No one really thought about it, or up until now gave really any training or support on it. But it is a problem, and people also think that you're accessible 24/7 constantly. And I have occasions where if I don't check my emails on a Saturday night, I'll have emails from people saying, you're so rude that you haven't got back to me. How dare you? And they use words such as disgusting. So they'll call you disgusting. And I think people just don't really recognise the impact of what they're saying and the fact that there's a human on the other end of that. But hopefully, I think those are the loud minority, and the majority of people don't think like that. And you rarely hear from people when they appreciate what you do. But recently, we have heard a lot more from people that they appreciate what we do because we're having a really tough time at the moment. Yeah. So that's been good to hear. Yeah. But it is something to be aware of, and it is a problem, and it's a problem that I personally am trying with those other people in that group to sort out because it's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about this expression for journalists of having a thick skin, but I don't think a thick skin can actually prepare you for the online bullying that occurs. So I think it's amazing you're doing that induction course. It's something that we can filter through to our students as well at Oxford Brookes with you on our journalism board. Hopefully it's something that you can talk to them about as well. What do you think? I mean, it is such a tricky time for the industry, isn't it? I mean, it has been for the last 20, 30 years through digital disruption, but how do students prepare themselves, do you think, for a career in this industry? What skills and attributes do you think they need, bearing in mind all the different things we've talked about today?
So I think there are traditional skills that you need, first of all, that have been the skills of reporters for hundreds of years. The most important skill, I think, is be able to listen to people and to get them to talk to you and to be empathetic in that they want to tell you their stories. Because if you can't do that, you don't have a story. That's really important. But I think it's really important to keep learning as well and to keep reading. You would not believe how many people that we get in, I say, what was the last newspaper you read? And they'll just, I don't. But, I know that it can, especially when you're a student, it costs money to get certain products, but there are ways of accessing stuff for free online. Is really important, and just to keep learning as well, and also to be resilient, because it is a really hard job. It is a really hard job, and I don't think anyone gets in it for money. That's not, you have to just absolutely love what you do and know that what you're doing is for a reason. You're doing it to try and better your community and make things better for everyone in your community. That's the fundamental reason why you want to get into journalism.
So you need to see that passion and that empathy from anybody that you're hopefully interviewing for positions. It's interesting, I think during this period it must have tested your belief in journalism, and with all the dangers and the disruptions to journalism. Are you coming through this period with a renewed sense of that purpose?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's been a time probably in recent history where it's been so important, and also trusted news is so important. I mean, a lot of people, I think it's something like 60% of UK adults get their primary news from social media, and they don't understand the dangers of that. I think having a trusted news source is incredibly important for everybody, and I think this time has really renewed that for me, because obviously there are days where it's just relentless and awful, and get a lot of abuse online. I just think, why do I bother? Why do I bother? But then you'll hear that you've really helped someone, that you've done. People come to us when they're at their wit's end, when it's their last hope of trying to get someone to listen to them, and everything they've tried to do has fallen on deaf ears. And so when you know that what you've done has helped someone like that, that's why you do it, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we need to thank you really for all your efforts to support your community and everything that you've done during the coronavirus pandemic as a publication. I mean, I think I live in the Oxfordshire area, and it's been really great keeping us connected when we felt so isolated. So I think that a majority of your readers will feel the same. And thank you, of course, for supporting us at Oxford Brookes. You come in and you meet our students, and you advise us on our courses and our new MA in journalism that's starting in September. Hopefully your words will inspire them, and you'll get to meet some of them as well. Hopefully we get back on campus at some point. But I'm going to thank you, Sam. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Cool.
Cheers.